impressed. I sat there, I was really smiling because he brought out even meaning that I didn't see while I was editing the text. That shows you that we need critics in society. And because criticism has moved away from art for art's sake, where you only look at the work of art for its own sake, for its beauty, for the aesthetics, then we have to also make statements about the society from which the work emanates. So criticism now is socially committed because you want to study the text and see how it can alter the social conditions in society. The text cannot exist in isolation from the society from which it is produced, or the society that produces the text now. So that's why literary criticism is socially committed, and because literary criticism is socially committed, it is also very political. Because politics conditions, determines a lot of things around us. And if you say that literature or criticism should not be concerned with politics, then you live in an illusion, you live in a lie, because we cannot have that divide anymore. Have that divide situation whereby literature exists on the other side and then criticism exists on the other side. If you do that, then you are not real. In criticism, we have an approach called realism, which says how the work of art is faithful to the realities in the environment. And so, a realistic critic then is one who uses the work of art to make statements about the social situations in society. So if you ever belong to that school that says, because even as you sit there, your next meal is determined by politics, your next salary is determined by politics, your next, whether you have money to go for conferences is determined by politics, whether you have funding for the projects that you have is determined by politics, whether you have money to send your children to school. Okay? So that is another point that I need to make in this lecture. Critics are important in society. This is because without criticism, people will do whatever they want. In fact, all of us are critics, as I mentioned in the lecture. Why are we all critics? Because we like to make comments about our experiences. You come to this event, when you leave, you go with an impression, and you have to report that impression. And because of that, you need to be conscious of the fact that criticism is part of our life. And so, we have to So critics are very important in society. As I said, without criticism, people will do as they want. But our first critic, our first critics were our parents at home. Our first critics were our parents at home. They will tell us what to do and what not to do. Then we now go to school. We have another set of critics who are teachers. Teachers will tell you the do's and don'ts that you need to survive after school. They compliment the parents, okay? And they are critics as well. And when you leave school, you go to church, your pastor is a critic. He tells you the right way of life. But sometimes when you have problems, when your pastor observes that you've done something wrong, he will tell you not to do it. He will advise you on the right way to go. Most of us will not be anything in life without these three groups of people: the parents, the teachers, and the pastors, or the imams, people who guide our moral life. That is the foundation of criticism. Okay? But when it comes to literature, we are looking at how to bring out meaning in the work of art and then relate that to the society from which the work of art emanates. Critics interrogate the important issues in society. Critics fight battles for all humanity, Take, for instance, colonialism. A group of people came from the West and said that we were barbaric, we were primitive, and we didn't have a culture. And then they imposed their language on us, imposed their culture on us, and made us live their way of life. It would take the nationalists, and I call them critics in their own right, who stood up and said, we are a civilized people. We are Africans, and black is beautiful. You cannot make us feel inferior. And they begin to galvanize the whole society and say, let us drive away these colonial masters so that we can take control of our own lives. Without visionary people like that, everybody would just be colonized today, and we would not know the essence of our culture. So we need critics in society. Critics speak when others keep quiet. Critics are bold and they do not fear. They tell the truth, they are honest, and that's why sometimes they are not liked. Because people don't want to hear the truth. People don't want to be told the truth. And in fact, one writer said, if you want to have friends, you want to have quality connections, don't criticize people. The writer of the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. So that is why criticism is a lonely path. And I can assure you that if you want to go into criticism and to do it honestly, you will not have many friends. But that the few friends that you have will be worthy. Because after all, in life, you don't need so many people to like you so that you can know your path and where you're going. And that is the message I have to every young person here who wants to be a critic in the future. Okay? By criticism, I don't mean you should always watch and wait until someone does something bad before you attack. Whatever good the person does, you don't see it. Once the person does something bad, you attack from the weak point. That is injurious criticism. That is negative criticism. Criticism is supposed to be balanced, okay? It's supposed to be objective. For instance, if you listen to Professor Friday Cohn's review, that is the model of criticism. Apportioning praises for the greatness of the work of art, the aspects of the work that are great, and then also talking about the aspects that are great. You understand? Now, if you listen to him, that's exactly what he did in that review, and that is how professional critics behave. You do not, because you say you call yourself a critic, that means you have to go around tarnishing people's images on social media. I always tell my students that they should be careful, and because if they do that, they could go in for libel. And we have those cases all the time in social media. People are arrested, tried because they made statements about people's reputation that they were not sure of. Okay? And in this age and time, if you want to be a critic, you have to be a very careful one. Okay? So that you will not break the law. That is another message that I would like to send across today. Another thing I would like to say, I would love to report on my works, but since I've already written them down, I won't want to go into that. A lot has been said about that. So I will just end by talking about some of the achievements that criticism has recorded in the human world so that it would inspire you to be a critic. You must have heard of gender liberation movement, feminism. You must understand that the fact that today the man is almost emasculated in the Western world does not mean that it has always been like that. There was a time in the Western world, say from the Renaissance to the 19th century, when women's education was not valued. So it would take some gender critics who stood up and started fighting for the rights of women for that situation to be reversed. Today, women know their rights, and society protects women's rights through extant laws. That is the job of critics. Critics always look for loopholes in society where oppression is, and then they speak about it, interrogate it to change that situation. And again, for critics like Achebe, they helped Achebe, Chinwezu, Eto, they helped Abiola Irede, they helped liberate us literature from the Eurocentric grip. The colonial masters wanted us to believe that we didn't have literature, but then we also told them that we have oral literature. They said our written literature was not sound enough. They brought a lot of charges, but our critics stood up, and today we can safely say that we have what we call African literature. Critics also make society to be conscious of the issues that concern them. For instance, the cultural subjugation of Africans, where Achebe had to say what we need to do is to try to look back and try to see where we went wrong, where the rain began to beat us. So we have to go back to the past and see that we always had a glorious past until colonialism came. And that was where slavery started. That was when the subjugation of African mentality started. And he also said, the critic, of course, is the teacher. Of course, Chinua Achebe wrote the novelists as teachers, and they said, and in one of the interesting quotes from that, he says, I would be quite satisfied if my novels, especially the ones I said in the past, did no more than teach my readers that the past, with all its imperfection, was not one long night of savagery, from which the first Europeans acting on God's behalf delivered them. So when you read a work of literature, it teaches you about the society in which you live in, the politics of that society, and how to survive in that society. Because the writers are committed to depicting the ills in their milieu. And if you are going to you want to act as a defense of society, if you want to be so studious and so well-read that you can see problems ahead of others in your society, and you can tell them, let us not follow this way. I have read so much, and I can see that if you follow this way, it will be better. Then you can join us on being a critic, because criticism gives direction to society. It's that important. My paper that won the Indonesia Award last year is entitled History versus History. A Mother's Memory, Achebe boasts the last of the strong ones, and Chimamanda Adichie's Have a Yellow Sun. Now, in that paper, what I did was to postulate on the fact that we have two versions of history, or to say that history is gendered. We have a male history, we have a female history. And male history happens when male writers write. And the female history counters male history as history, okay, not history. So you can see how, because in contemporary criticism, all stories pass as narratives. All stories pass as narratives. Whether you're reading economic textbooks, you're reading mathematics textbooks, you're reading newspaper, all stories are narratives. And sometimes these narratives can be gendered depending on who writes. So the author is also important. The author is not there anymore. So if it's a male writer that writes, you need to watch and see how it's going to depict the other gender. And if it's a female writer that writes, we need to begin to watch and see how the female writer depicts the male writer now, because we are getting to a point where we are having counter discourse, because the woman's story is now soon becoming a meta-narrative, especially in Western countries, and men are losing their powers. Okay? It might not happen in Africa for now, but in the Western countries, we are beginning to have a counter discourse where men are beginning to say, we have lost our rights. In the areas maybe of marriage, in the areas maybe of child custody, and so they have to begin to fight back and reclaim some of this right from the women. Because in Western courts, the man has no voice. You know? And that's why it's very difficult for most people to marry and take their wives abroad right now because they're afraid they will turn tiger. Right? So that is how criticism works. You need to get to the point where you see when something has changed, when there has been a shift, like I mentioned in one of my papers, and then you need to talk about it in that way. And so I won't want to take much of your time. I have to end my lecture here. And once again, I thank the Vice Chancellor and all the invited guests, my students, the HOD, the Dean, everyone who has made this day a reality. I ask that may God bless and keep you. And very soon you will also be celebrated. Remember that whenever any good thing happens to you, you need to change the mentality of our people. Where we celebrate people only when they have died. We need to change that mentality. Whenever something good happens to you, you need to celebrate, and that is the most important thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eyoh Etim, the winner of the 2023 Nigeria Prize for Literary Criticism. Please a big round of applause for him. We listened very carefully to what he shared because there are many lessons in there to learn, and I pray we should be able to apply them. Thank you very much. So this is the moment we have been waiting for. You cannot say you are tired. So I now most respectfully invite our dear Vice Chancellor, a man so patient, so humble, so kind, staff, student, friendly Vice Chancellor. Please shall we rise one more time? Shall we rise to welcome Vice Chancellor, Bible State University Professor Eyoh Etim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, you can sit. Let me recognize the head of campus, the head of departments of English, capacity, Dr. Monica Director. Those is now capacity. Let me also recognize all the professors here, all the directors here, heads of departments, and also students. Great and grand students. Great.